Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm here to guide us through our sources today.
And I'm your resident expert, and I'm really excited to get into this one.
Me too, because, usually when we talk about history, we expect this, this grand scale, right?
Right, like museums, dusty archives, dates carved into stone, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Treaties signed by kings. But what if the most accurate record of history isn't like a monument at all? What if it's just a faded kitchen towel folded exactly in thirds?
Or the smell of garlic hitting hot oil.
Yes. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore this invisible architecture of families. We are pulling excerpts from a really beautiful novel called The Hours Unfolding by Max and Claude.
It's a fantastic source text. It really moves from that macro level of historical events down to this deeply personal, incredibly layered landscape.
Yeah, and we're going to decode how history, trauma, and love are passed down, not through big dramatic declarations, but through the completely mundane.
Things that are often entirely invisible until you know exactly how to look for them.
Right. So to set the scene for you listening, the source material places us in a house that has held 3 generations of women. First, there's Marta, the grandmother and immigrant who arrived from the old country with almost nothing.
Then there's her daughter, Eleanor.
Right. And now Eleanor's daughter, Catherine. And Catherine is our 47-year-old protagonist. She's currently alone in this house, actively grieving the recent loss of her mother, Eleanor.
And meanwhile, we have a 4th generation to consider, right? Catherine's 27-year-old daughter, Sophie.
Oh, Sophie, yeah.
Sophie lives in the city, and she is actively avoiding the weight of all this family history.
She is running the other way. But it's incredible how the text takes something as seemingly boring as standing at a kitchen sink and turns it into this profound meditation on time.
The domestic space is really the center of gravity here.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. So Catherine is standing at that exact sink. The same sink her grandmother, Marta, chose from a catalog decades ago.
Which, at the time, was a choice that promised modernity and efficiency.
Yeah, but now Catherine has her hands in the dishwater, and she's not even rushing anything. She's just standing there feeling the temperature change, hot to warm to tepid to cold. And she explicitly compares this cooling water to the second law of thermodynamics.
Entropy.
Oh,
Yeah, the fundamental principle that the universe is constantly moving toward disorder. Heat dissipates, systems break down.
It's so bleak.
It is, but Catherine is feeling that universal decay, that slow drift toward the heat death of the universe, right there in her kitchen sink. It's this brilliant, tactile manifestation of her grief.
Because her mother died.
Exactly. The system of her family has broken down, and she is feeling the literal cooling of her world.
Wow. But against that massive, unstoppable decay, the text sets up this endless chain of domestic knowledge.
The pushback against the entropy.
Yeah, it's the specific way she folds this yellowed white towel over the rack. It's the braiding of the garlic by the back door, which, practically speaking, doing it exactly how Marta did it, actually keeps the garlic fresh.
Form and function.
Right. And it's winding the clock in the hall every Sunday, a clock that her grandfather Andre started winding back in 1952. I was reading this and I thought, it's like these women are operating as a human USB drive.
A human USB drive. I like that.
They are transferring the family's operating system through muscle memory from generation to generation.
And the data transfer isn't conscious, right? It lives below language. It's almost cellular. The specific tension on the garlic braid, the exact 3 folds of the towel, these are legacy programs running in the background of Catherine's daily life.
Okay, but I do have to push back a little on the romance of that idea.
Okay, go for it.
Because isn't this just mindless repetition? Early on in the excerpts, Catherine seems absolutely trapped by these chores.
She's definitely isolated.
Very isolated. Her fingers are pruning in the cold water, and she's feeling like all human effort, cooking, cleaning, winding the clock, is just a pathetic attempt to delay the inevitable apocalypse.
Right. It feels like a prison sentence of domestic labor.
Exactly. It doesn't feel empowering at all. She's just going through the motions to keep the void at bay.
Well, when you are in the thick of grief, those routines absolutely feel like a trap. But the text digs into the psychological why behind that repetition. It isn't actually mindless.
It's not.
No, it's a vital psychological mechanism. When time feels completely unmanageable, like when someone dies and the future just vanishes, anchoring the self to physical repetition is sometimes the only way to survive the day.
Just to get to tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The author portrays time in this house not as a circle or even a straight line moving forward, but as a palimpsest.
Oh, a palimpsest. For anyone listening who hasn't encountered that term, a palimpsest is like an old medieval manuscript where the monks would scrape off the old text to write a new document over it.
But they could never fully erase the old words.
Right. The original text still ghosts through the new ink.
And in the context of this house, all the generations exist simultaneously in that exact way. When Catherine makes her grandmother's tomato sauce or folds the towel, she isn't just mimicking Marta.
She's embodying her.
Yes. Marta is literally present in the action. The ritual creates a physical bridge across time. So it's not a prison. It's a domestic rebellion against entropy.
Wow, a rebellion against entropy.
The universe is falling apart, the water is going cold, sure. But the act of folding the towel says, not today. Today, we hold the fabric together.
That is so powerful. Think about your own daily habits, right? Like maybe you make your coffee exactly the way your dad did, or you have a weirdly specific way of folding your t-shirts that you learned from someone who isn't around anymore.
You're writing over their text, but their ink is still showing through.
Exactly. So the physical actions are passed down silently, keeping the family anchored. But that brings up a massive question for me.
What's that?
What happens to the emotional history? I mean, the trauma, the terrifying memories that you absolutely cannot express through a pasta sauce recipe.
Right, the things you can't just fold into a towel.
Yeah. How do families communicate the unspeakable?
Well, the physical actions cover the daily survival, but the emotional truth requires a completely different mechanism of transmission, which leads us directly into the secrets Marta kept.
Oh man, the secrets.
And the highly specific way she chose to reveal them.
Yeah, because Marta crossed the ocean in the hold of a ship, packed with hundreds of people, surrounded by a smell she, quote, never found words for.
A deeply traumatic crossing.
And she never told her daughter Eleanor about this. She never told Catherine either. But years later, she did tell 14-year-old Sophie while they were deadheading roses in the garden.
She just casually drops this heavy traumatic history onto her teenage granddaughter.
Yeah. I mean, usually we assume we share our deepest secrets with the people closest to us.
What's fascinating here is the dynamic of generational distance. It creates this psychological phenomenon we can call a proximity paradox.
The proximity paradox. It's totally counterintuitive, but it makes so much sense. Like if you've ever found yourself telling a stranger on an airplane a secret you couldn't possibly tell your own spouse,
Yeah.
You've experienced this.
Exactly. Distance makes the truth feel safer to handle.
But here, the mother and the daughter are totally bypassed. The grandchild gets the heavy truth. Why?
Because Catherine realizes that she and her mother Eleanor were simply too close for the truth to land softly.
Too close.
Eleanor was the first generation born here. She desperately wanted to be American. She actively wanted to sever the weight of the old country.
So telling her would have been disastrous.
It would have been a massive psychological burden. For Marta to share the raw trauma of the boat or the memory of the communal ovens in her village, it would have crushed Eleanor's attempt to build a new identity.
But a granddaughter is different.
Very different. A grandmother can love without the intense, suffocating anxiety of a mother.
The stakes are different.
Fundamentally different. A mother is constantly terrified of keeping a child alive, of preparing them for the brutal reality of the world. Every interaction is loaded with the pressure of survival.
Right.
But the grandmother has already survived that terror. The immediate threat has passed. The generational distance removes the anxiety, which makes it safe to finally speak the unspeakable.
Which perfectly explains another incredible moment that Sophie reveals to Catherine later. When Sophie was very young, Marta once took her face in her hands and explicitly said, "I love you," in English.
Something she clearly practiced.
Yes, turned over in her mind and deliberately decided to say out loud. And Catherine realizes Marta never, ever said that to her or to Eleanor.
With Catherine and Eleanor, the proximity paradox dictated a different language entirely. Marta had to translate her love into actions.
Like waking up in the middle of the night.
Right. Pressing a cool wet cloth to a 5-year-old Catherine's feverish head and humming a melody from the old country. A melody entirely without words.
Because giving the melody words would have carried the specific geographical weight of the old country, the exact trauma they were all implicitly agreeing to escape.
The love is absolutely there. It just has to bypass language to survive the journey. It's pure protective melody.
Wow. Families communicate the unspeakable by changing the medium to fit the receiver.
Sometimes it's a spoken secret to a grandchild safely distanced by time, and sometimes it's a wordless hum to a sick child who needs comfort but can't carry the history.
That is beautiful. But Marta's spoken words to Sophie are only one piece of the puzzle. The truth is, the most profound secrets Marta kept weren't spoken to anyone at all.
They weren't hummed in the dark either.
No, they were physically buried in the architecture of the house itself, just waiting for the palimpsest to be scraped back by Catherine.
The artifacts of arrival, the things you carry with you when you have to leave everything else behind.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Catherine's taking inventory of the house after her mother's death. She's looking in those weird, forgotten spaces you never really look.
Like above the fridge?
Yes, the very back of a high cabinet above the fridge. And she finds a faded green tin. Inside this tin are unidentified seeds, wrapped in an old piece of cloth tied with string, alongside a tightly sealed envelope.
The physical objects of inheritance often tell the stories that the muscle memory and the melodies just can't.
And Catherine doesn't tear open the letter right away. She waits. And she has no idea what these seeds are. Eventually, she takes the seeds to an agricultural botanist.
And what do they find?
The botanist identifies them as an heirloom aromatic herb, virtually extinct commercially. Marta brought them across the ocean because, as the text notes, they tasted like the word for home.
Incredible. And then there's the envelope. Through Mrs. Petrovsky, the 87-year-old neighbor who actually knew Marta back in the old country, the context of the seal envelope finally comes to light.
Right. They finally open the letter in the spring. It's from a man Marta loved in the provincial capital before the war scattered everyone.
The letter is dated 1953.
1953. He survived the war, managed to get out, and tracked down her address. He didn't know she was married or had a child. He asked for nothing at all in the letter.
He just hoped she, quote, found the life.
And Marta kept it in that tin, sealed, or maybe she opened it and meticulously resealed it. Catherine can't actually tell.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this green tin represents the absolute duality of the immigrant experience.
How so?
The excruciating psychological tension between arriving and leaving.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and the seeds and the letter are both essentially time capsules, but they require completely different mechanisms to open.
That's a great way to look at it.
One requires literal soil and water, and the other requires an emotional readiness that might take a lifetime to achieve.
And looking at the timeline provided in the sources highlights that friction perfectly. Mrs. Petrovsky reveals that Marta planted the garden the very first spring they arrived in the new country.
She did this before they even bought furniture for the inside of the house.
Right. Her husband, Andrzej, was completely baffled as to why she was prioritizing digging in the dirt over buying curtains or chairs.
I mean, you could see his point.
Sure, but Marta understood a fundamental truth about displacement. Until she put something living into the ground, she was still in transit. She was still leaving.
Planting the garden wasn't a hobby.
No, it was the ultimate act of committing to the ground. It was the physical, undeniable act of saying, we are here.
It's the ultimate anchor. She's forcing herself to commit to the new reality. But then, years later, she gets this letter in 1953.
Which shatters the simplicity of that commitment.
Yeah.
Marta is simultaneously happy here and always about to leave. She grounds her future by planting the seeds. But she keeps the 1953 letter from the man she loved before.
The psychology of this is profound.
Keeping the letter was a way to hold on to the before without letting it destroy the delicate after she had built. I mean, how do you possibly answer a letter like that when you have a husband, a child, a garden, a whole new existence?
You can't. It would blow up the new life.
Exactly. So you seal it in a tin and hide it above the fridge. It's the immigrant's palimpsest, the ghost of the old life living silently above the reality of the new one.
Marta anchored herself by planting those seeds. But what happens when the next generation looks at that anchor and sees a chain?
That's the conflict with Sophie.
Right. The youngest generation, Sophie, initially views this profound grounding as a total trap. How does someone like Sophie, a modern 27-year-old graphic designer living in the city, reconcile with this incredibly heavy, complicated inheritance?
Sophie's transformation is really the emotional engine of these sources. We have to look at the mechanics of how she moves from rejection to integration.
Because early on, Sophie is actively fleeing her history. She texts brief, evasive messages instead of visiting the house. She explicitly tells Catherine she refuses to have children to continue the family line.
And her reasoning is entirely modern, right? Climate dread.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we aren't taking a stance on the climate debate here. We're simply reporting what the source says about her specific anxieties. She says the world is ending, the future is nothing but fire and flood, so why bring life into a catastrophe?
She desperately wants urban autonomy, a clean slate, disconnected from all this generational baggage.
She views the house, the rituals, the family history as a script written by dead people.
A rigid, suffocating weight that will crush her own individuality. She believes she has to escape the architecture of her family to build the architecture of her own self.
It's interesting because her macro-apocalyptic fear of climate change totally mirrors Catherine's micro-apocalyptic fear at the sink with the cooling water.
Oh, absolutely. They are both paralyzed by the idea that everything is ending.
But then we see this incredible shift in Sophie, and it's directly catalyzed by watching Catherine do the active, messy work of remembering.
The British novel.
Yes, Catherine finds the mid-century British novel her mother Eleanor was reading before her cognition failed. Eleanor had physically made it to page 112.
So Catherine sits down, reads the rest of the novel for her, and then writes a long letter to her dead mother in the blank back pages of the book.
She's actively engaging with the ghosts. And Sophie witnesses this. Sophie sees that the past isn't a locked vault. It's an ongoing conversation.
That realization is the turning point. Seeing her mother write in the back of the book proves to Sophie that history is interactive. It's not a trap that swallows you whole. It's a garden you can actively tend.
And once she realizes that, Sophie starts changing her behavior. She brings a living plant from her apartment, a bay laurel, carrying it from her north-facing city window to the south-facing kitchen window of the old house.
A massive symbolic gesture. She's no longer just a guest in a museum.
Right, she's bringing something of hers into the ancestral space.
She's realizing that the house is expansive enough to hold her modern life, too. She officially claims the spare room to work from when she visits.
And then the detail that absolutely broke me. Doing dishes at Christmas, Sophie starts humming.
The melody.
It's the wordless melody Marta hummed to Catherine all those years ago. Sophie heard Catherine hum it absent-mindedly just once, internalized it like a software update, and now it's hers. Finally, Sophie officially asks Catherine to teach her the sauce recipe and to plant the extinct heirloom seeds with her in the spring. She explicitly asks to take on the role of the seed keeper.
Quite the turnaround.
So what does this all mean? Why does she pivot so drastically from running away to running toward it?
I think it comes down to this. Sophie thought the house was a tether holding her back, keeping her from her own life. But she realizes it's actually a runway. Having deep roots is precisely what gives you the structural safety to fly.
The sources articulate this realization beautifully. Sophie has this quiet moment in her city apartment. She's looking at an old brick building across the street, and she realizes she knows absolutely nothing about it, who built it, or who lived there.
Right.
And she has this epiphany, knowing a place is owning it. She had assumed that accepting the family history meant erasing her modern city-dwelling self.
But the palimpsest allows for both. Yes. The old ink and the new ink can coexist. She doesn't have to choose. She can be the independent urban graphic designer and the ancestral seed keeper. She integrates the invisible architecture of her ancestors into the very real architecture of her own identity.
It all culminates in this beautiful, tactile sequence where Catherine literally signs up for a class to learn how to read Marta's old, incredibly fragile tissue paper dress pattern.
And Catherine manages to make the blue dress, and Sophie wears it.
It's the perfect compromise. The past gives you the blueprint, but you still get to tailor the dress to fit your body today.
Exactly. The past doesn't rigidly dictate the future. It simply provides the pattern. You still have to actively choose the fabric, adjust the seams for your own life, and stitch it together yourself.
It really makes you evaluate your own life. Are you rejecting your own house? Whether that's a physical hometown you couldn't wait to leave, a specific cultural background, or even just a quirky family trait you've tried to iron out of your personality.
Are you rejecting it because it feels like a heavy tether?
Rather than a foundation you can build your own runway on.
That is the core tension we all face. Do we run from the history, or do we learn to wear the dress on our own terms?
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the thermodynamics of cooling dishwater and the daily defiant fight against entropy, to a wordless melody passed down like an encrypted survival code.
We've looked at extinct seeds that literally taste like the word for home.
And finally, watched a daughter stop running and claim her place in the continuity of time.
You know, this raises an important question, and it ties into a final, crucial detail from the source material.
Oh, right, the second tin.
Yes, because Catherine's inventory of the house doesn't actually end with that first tin above the fridge. In June, long after they've planted the heirloom seeds and started the garden anew, she finds a second green tin hidden far behind a flower canister.
And the second tin completely recontextualizes Marta's inner life.
Completely, because inside the second tin isn't seeds or a letter from a lost love. It is a handmade, hand-sewn notebook.
A notebook.
Mrs. Petrowski looks at it and explains it's not a standard diary. In the old language, there's a specific word for it that roughly translates to a directed thinking.
Directed thinking.
It was a private space where Marta wrote intense philosophical letters to herself or to the past, a way of speaking towards someone who isn't physically there.
Hundreds of pages of letters she wrote, but never intended to send to anyone.
But the critical detail is this. Marta didn't throw this notebook away. She had decades to destroy it. She could have burned it in the yard at any point. But she deliberately left it in the house.
She left it to be found.
Yes.
Like leaving breadcrumbs for Catherine and Sophie, knowing that one day they would be old enough and distant enough to finally understand her fully. So we want to leave you with a profound question to explore on your own today.
Think about your own family's invisible architecture.
What unspoken seeds or wordless melodies have been planted in you by previous generations? And more importantly, if your life is a palimpsest, if you are the one currently holding the pen, what are you consciously choosing to write over the old text for the next generation to find?
When you stand at the sink, feeling the water cool, are you just letting the system break down, or are you choosing to fold the towel?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.